great audiences. I'm going to leave you with this one here. The first song I ever heard that made any sense to me was called Smells Like Teen Spirit. I was 12 years old. I was riding in the back of my dad's car. He was taking me to school. I said, "What is that?" And it was like explosions going off inside of my brain. And it was the first time I ever heard music that resonated down in my heart. And so my dad got me the Nevermind CD. And my mama didn't like it because it had a little naked baby on it. I had to put a little P electrical tape over the top of the little naked baby so I could take it over to my mama's house, you know. And then I listened to that record till it was burned into my brain. And then whenever I turned 15 years old, we started going into out there by the University of South Alabama. There's this record store called Satori Sound Records. I used to go down there, and the first time I went in there, they said, "What you into?" I said, "I'm into Nirvana." They said, "You'll probably be in this band called Sonic Youth." So I bought this record called Experimental Jet Set Trash and No Star. And I listened to that, and it was like Nevermind. It just kind of blew me away, you know. And I was fortunate because Sonic Youth already had a pretty long back catalog by that time. So I started saving up my money, and I'd buy the next oldest Sonic Youth release. And I was just infatuated with rock and roll back in those days. And then whenever I was 18 years old, I had a religious experience. Took me to an independent fundamental Baptist church where they don't like rock and roll music at all. And so when I started going to the schools, you know, they would check and make sure you didn't bring any of that music and stuff and that was part of the reasons I had so many damn demerits, you know. I got kicked out of every one I went to, you know. But after I got to the third one, I started settling down. I was trying to obey the rules and all that stuff. And then the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, they like what they call Southern gospel music, which if you grow up listening to Nirvana, it's impossible to like Southern gospel music. It's just like the other end of a spectrum, and it's like the most fake ass shit in the world. You know, it's like you just can't stomach it. And so I couldn't ever stomach that shit, and I was like, well, but I still love music. Well, then but they had no problem with old time and bluegrass music, because sometimes bluegrass bands would come and play and stuff. So I bought me a banjo when I was 18 years old, and I bought me a book called Teach Yourself to 5-String Banjo. Yep. And I started learning how to do that in the dormitories at Tennessee Temple University in Chattanooga. And then I moved up outside of Knoxville in Powell, Tennessee, and I used to go up there and I was playing around. I learned how to play with my fingers, and then I learned how to play with my fingernails. And then I was just playing banjo back in them days, and then I started playing, you know, church and stuff like that. And then whenever I went off to pastor when I was 25, I was playing banjo, and I was playing the guitar, leading, singing in the church. And my church we only had 60 people. But most of the time we had less than that because I split it twice. Then I started having like this kind of I got out of the echo chamber. I was up there in East Kentucky by myself, split my church twice. My wife was really tore up about everything. I was trying to raise the kids. I was working for minimum wage during the week and preaching on the weekends, and I was in a bad way. And then that happened to coincide with the advent of high-speed internet access in the Middlesboro, Kentucky. And so when I got YouTube, the first thing I wanted to know was how in the hell Roscoe Holcomb was picking the banjo like he was, because it sounded like it didn't make no damn sense in my mind. I heard him, but I couldn't figure it out. And back, you know, before the internet, you couldn't find videos of stuff like that. You know, if you found a video of something like that, it was like solid gold, you know, but now you got all kind of weird shit on the internet. But you know, used to you had to dig for weird shit, you know. And anyway, so in 2007 when I got YouTube, I immediately wanted to figure out how the hell Roscoe Holcomb was doing what he was doing on the banjo. I wanted to see it with my eyeballs. And then, so I started watching videos of Roscoe Holcomb, and I just went on down the list, which there wasn't a lot even in 2007, but there was some. And then I came on down to this thing, and it was a Newport Folk Festival, I believe, at 62 or something like that. And then I saw this guy, Bob Dylan, was singing this song called Blowing in the Wind. And at that time in my life, I didn't really know who Bob Dylan was. I knew my dad had his records and all, but it's kind of for old people or something. And then I heard him sing "Blowing in the Wind," and I had been almost a year without feeling anything inside of my soul. I thought God had like abandoned me or something back in them days. And that thing lit a match inside of my heart, and I was like, "Oh my God, what is this?" And then I was using YouTube to figure out who else did that. And there ain't many of them, but there was some. And then I started trying to write songs myself. And through writing songs and painting, that was the way I discovered who the hell I was. And that helped me take off all those masks and all those uniforms and costumes I was wearing. And it helped me dig down into all the stuff that I had erected and the sets that I had built inside my brain. And then it helped get me the courage to finally leave. And then I left it, and then I joined the military, and I just wrote songs and I painted all to myself, and that was the way I survived. And then whenever I came back, I started playing them, and then some people was crazy enough to like them, and then I started traveling around the country and playing them to people. And then about 2 years ago, a buddy of mine named J.B. Boyd, he's the head of the radio station over there in Memphis, Tennessee, or something like that. He works for him. And me and JB go way back. He was one of the first people to write an article about me back whenever I first started playing music. And he came over to my house. I had a Sonic Youth shirt on. And so we had a conversation about Sonic Youth way on early, and when I first started writing songs and playing them out for people. And then so JB called me about 2 years ago. He said, "Abe, you ain't gonna believe this, but Steve Shelley from Sonic Youth is playing your songs on his program here." And I was like, "Damn, dude, you gotta connect us, And so about 20 minutes later, I got a text that said, "Hey, this is Steve Shelley. I've been playing your songs on my station. I really like them and on my program here." And I was like, "Wow." And so I said, I was kind of like blown away. I said, "Man, I think Sonic Youth is the best band that ever was, And well, then I went on tour with Matthew Sweet in 2024. He took me all over the country. He was the first person to take me up into the Northeast. I had never been north of Virginia, and he took me all up through all the big cities up through there. And he took me into New York. So I wrote Steve Shelley. I said, "Hey, Steve, I'm coming into New York City." Steve was in Sonic Youth, but he also worked with Townes Van Zandt and Daniel Johnston and a lot of great. He always had a big thing for songwriters and stuff. I said, "Hey, Steve, I'm coming in New York City, man. You want to hang out?" He said, "Yeah, you can come over here to NYU. That means New York University." And he said, "You come up here to the 8th floor, and me and some of my buddies, we're gonna be sitting around watching movies about punk rock in Berlin in the 1980s, and you can come sit with us." And I said, "Hell yeah," So my first time in New York City, I drove onto that island like a dumbass, I should have never done that. I didn't know no better, and when I went over there on that island, I finally found it to NYU. I walk up the steps, I get up on the 8th floor, I walk in there with Steve Shelley, and I was like, "Oh my God." And so, and then I looked around, there was other people that were in that room that I had records of when I was a kid too. And I was like, man, this is crazy. There was less people in that room than there is in this one. And then we watched these movies about punk rock in Berlin in the 1980s. And then I was like, my God, what a strange first night in New York City for an independent fundamental Baptist preacher. I said, "Steve, man, what are you doing?" He's like, "Well, tomorrow," he's like, "come pick me up. I'm going to take you down to Jersey City and put you on the radio." And I was like, "All right." So I go pick him up and go down and put me on. He had playing live songs there on the radio and recording them and everything at WFMU there. And then me and Steve were going to go hang out and get something to eat. So then we start going out. And then as we're going down the road, I look over and there's a sign that says, "Tonight, live in person, Lightning Hopkins." I was like, "Damn, man, what is that?" I mean, I'd love to see Lightning Hopkins in person, but it ain't going to be tonight. You know what I'm saying? find a way to get back into the past to do that kind of thing. And then I saw another sign that said Pete Seeger banjo lessons. I was like, man, what the hell is this place? And all these old cars and shit. He was like, this is the set for the Bob Dylan movie. So they had turned the whole damn street in Jersey City into the set for the Bob Dylan movie. And I said, I didn't know they was making no movie about Bob Dylan. He said, yeah, that's awesome. And then so the Bob Dylan movie came out in February last year, and I took my daughter to the movies to see it. Then I saw Bob Dylan singing to Woody Guthrie, and I thought that was one of the most beautiful things that I've seen in cinema in quite some time. And I try not to let my daughter see me tearing up, you know. But it was just such a beautiful thing.